And now we get to look at the third of the clades, the group Bilateria subdivided into. The clade Deuterostomia. And the Deuterostome are going to be primarily two phyla. I mean, there's other phyla that are included here, but the two phyla we're going to see, Echinodermata and Chordata, are going to be animals where during development of the embryo, the blastopore, the opening into the archenteron of the embryo, becomes the anus and the mouth forms second. And so Deuterostomia means mouth second. The Phylum Echinodermata is one that includes beautiful, fascinating organisms. And the word Echinodermata means spiny skin. Echino, spiny, dermata, skin. And so all of the members of this phylum are going to have an appearance of, and actually physically, spines, but the spines can be sometimes long and sharp, or sometimes can be like very short and dull or blunt. And an example of what I'm talking about right now is going to be this C-star you see right here. The bumps you see on the arms, those are actual spines, but as you can see, they're going to be rather short, dull, blunt, compared to the spines you see in this sea urchin, which are going to be long and sharp. Things are going to be, very different. One of the characteristics of these animals is that they use 2 feet for locomotion. And so what you see here in this sea cucumber, there's always the exception for everything, right? And so with the sea cucumber, what appears to be spines is actually going to be the 2 feet. But nevertheless, this looks like a threatening type of an image, and it's one that can prevent the animal from being eaten by predators who may think that those are sharp coverings of the body of the animal. In the case of a sand dollar, like the one you see right here, the spines are going to be very short, very fine, but they do have them. And when we're in class, if you want to ask me for looking at a specimen, you will be able to see, I'll be able to show you the little fine spines of a sand dollar. Most of the time people have these objects around home for ornamental purposes, but they don't have any spines, and that's because the spines fall off when the skin of the animal decomposes after death. So deuterostomes, remember, mouth forms second. These are animals that have an internal skeleton. The internal skeleton is going to be based on a framework of calcareous plates. So when I use the word calcareous, means calcium carbonate, a compound that is abundant in the ocean. So these animals can take that calcium carbonate from seawater, retain it, and secrete it by specialized cells that are responsible for making these calcareous plates. Out of these calcareous plates, sometimes spines are going to emerge, or spicules, which are going to be like smaller spine-like projections like the ones I mentioned before in the case of the sand dollar. One thing that is interesting about the echinoderms is that the circulatory system they have is not for blood or hemolymph or for nutrients. The circulatory system they have is for water. And this is important because for these animals, one thing that controls their locomotion, the 2 feet, requires water. So when water comes into the body of the animal, or I'm talking about seawater, this is circulated into vessels that run along the arms of something like a sea star, or into the compartments of a sand dollar or a sea urchin. And that water is going to be used for pumping and filling up the 2 feet, which then will extend and allow for the animal to move. That seawater circulates and then eventually can go out. The animal can regulate how much water is inside of the circulatory system, or when they need to release it. So this is something that is completely unique in animals. Only the echinoderms have this type of circulatory system where water is the thing that is moving inside. So how do they circulate nutrients? The coelom, these animals are eucoelomates. The coelom, where organs are forming, is going to be lined by ciliated cells, and the movement of the cilia can move nutrients inside of that space that extends throughout the interior of the animal. Body covered with spines. The reproduction for these animals is going to be, for the most part, sexual reproduction. They practice what we call external fertilization, which means that they simply secrete the gametes, release the gametes into the water, and by random chance, the right sperm will find the egg. There are pre-zygotic barriers here. There are going to be special proteins that will allow for the right egg from the right species to be fertilized by the correct sperm of the same species. And so if that recognition, if the proteins don't match, then there's going to be no fertilization. And this is one of those pre-zygotic barriers we've seen before. It's a pre-zygotic barrier known as gamete isolation. So there are a few groups of echinoderms that I want you to pay attention to. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of an itchy throat. There are going to be some groups that I want you to pay attention to, and one is going to be the class Asteroidea. Aster means star. So the classic sea stars with 5 arms are going to be members of class Asteroidea. We also have the class Echinoidea, which is going to be the sea urchins. And here in this picture, you see examples of sea urchins. The body is kind of like a disc, and that disc is going to have spines that provide protection for the animal. The Ophiuroidea, the brittle stars, are also animals with 5 arms, but the arms are going to be fragile and easy to break. And so because of that fragility, the animals are said to be brittle, something that breaks easily, and they get their name, the brittle stars. That's going to be the class Ophiuroidea. The way the arms move sometimes, it kind of looks like a little snake in the ocean, and that's exactly what this means. Ophiu, it comes from a root which means snake. Holothuroidea. This is going to be the sea cucumbers. Perhaps you've seen them. They have a culinary value in some parts of the world. These are consumed. They are a delicacy from the ocean. Sea cucumbers, sea apples are also going to be here in this subdivision of the Phylum Echinodermata. And finally, we have the crinoids, the sea lilies and feather stars. And you can see an example of one of those sea lilies. Again, at times it looks like a plant on the ocean floor, but these are not plants, these are animals. And what you see here are going to be like bundles of cilia that they can, bundles of tube feet, and the tube feet are going to be used for moving water in the direction of the mouth, which is located here, where all of these, what appears like arms, are going to be projecting from. They also have a specialized part of the body that they use for anchoring, for attachment to the substrate. And you can see that in this illustration as well. And finally, the last group of animals that I wanted to introduce here is going to be the Phylum Chordata. Chordates are well known because included in the Phylum Chordata are all of the vertebrates, animals that have a true backbone. And so if this is an introduction to the invertebrates, why in the world are we talking about chordates here? And the reason is, listen carefully, this is important, there are 2 groups of chordates that are invertebrates, meaning they don't have an internal backbone. And so, yes, it is possible to have chordates that are invertebrates. And what they have in common, all of the members of Phylum Chordata, is that they do have bilateral symmetry. These are deuterostomes, meaning that the mouth forms second. They are also going to be eucoelomates. They have a true coelom where organs are going to be developing internally. They are going to have a single dorsal nerve cord, and the characteristic that makes a chordate well, a chordate, is going to be the presence of a notochord, which you can see in this illustration down at the bottom. It's going to be like a stiff rod. It's not hard like bone, but this stiff rod it's flexible too. It will provide anchoring for muscles of the animal, but it will also be providing protection, support to the dorsal hollow nerve cord these animals have. So in the arrangement of structures, you'll typically see that notochord, especially during embryonic development, and then just above it is going to be the dorsal hollow nerve cord. They are going to have a post-anal tail, at least during development. As embryos, most embryos and larval stages of chordates, even those who don't have a tail as adults, are going to have this post-anal tail. And also during development, there are going to be like slits on the throat region, again, at least during the embryo development, that we call pharyngeal pouches or pharyngeal slits. And so the two chordates that are invertebrates, meaning they don't have a backbone, are going to be the Subphylum Tunicata, and you can see examples of tunicates. Sea squirts are also going to be members of Subphylum Tunicata. The tunicates, like the ones you see right here, are beautiful animals, have a kind of like a translucent, meaning light can go through. They have a translucent appearance. Often they can be brightly colored, like you see these here that are blue, others can be purple or red. And they move water into a large opening, which is a siphon, is an incurrent siphon, and then water goes through another siphon, an excurrent siphon. So these animals, the tunicates, they have a notochord during embryonic development, but the notochord doesn't continue to develop. It actually disappears. In the adult body, you cannot see a notochord. This animal you see here is a lancelet that is a member of Subphylum Cephalochordata. The cephalochordate body plan is the one that I've shown you here in this illustration. This is like a lateral view of a lancelet, a cephalochordate. And so these animals in the ocean, they look like a small fish. Unlike fish, the head region doesn't seem to have a lot of sensory organs. They don't have the paired fins, like pectoral fins, pelvic fins that typically fish will have. But nevertheless, they do have that streamlined body. Lancelets do retain the notochord during the adult life. So this illustration that I've included in this slide would be one describing an adult lancelet. And you can see that the notochord is still there. But it never develops into a backbone. What happens in all of the other chordates we call vertebrates is that the notochord will be eventually developing and replaced by a backbone with many vertebrae that will be providing, again, protection for the dorsal nerve cord of chordates. And so we will be talking about chordates in another topic. This is going to be another weekend class when we will be exploring the diversity of the vertebrates. But for right now, what I want you to remember is that chordates, the word chordata simply means that animals that possess a notochord are going to be included here, and that there are two groups of chordates, the tunicates and the cephalochordates that don't have a backbone, but they did have a notochord at least during embryonic development. That is all for now, and next up is going to be the study of vertebrate diversity.